My youngest son, David, an air traffic controller, called me from the airport. Mom, something really strange is happening. Is Jessica at home? Yes, she is, I replied without hesitation. She's upstairs taking a shower. David's voice dropped to a whisper that sent chills down my spine. That's impossible, Mom. I have her name right here on the passenger manifest. She just boarded flight 447 to Miami 20 minutes ago. At that exact moment, I heard footsteps coming down the stairs behind me. Good thing you're home, Maggie, came Jessica's familiar voice. If you're watching this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story from. I want to know how far this tale of deception has reached. This morning started like any other in our cozy home in Memphis, Tennessee. The autumn air carried that crisp promise of cooler days ahead, and golden sunlight streamed through our kitchen windows as I bustled around preparing breakfast. My son David had already left early for his shift at Memphis International Airport, where he works as an air traffic controller, a job that requires precision, attention to detail, and nerves of steel. Those same qualities that make him excellent at guiding planes safely through the skies. Our house felt peacefully quiet after the morning rush. My grandson Tyler, that bright-eyed 8-year-old bundle of energy, had been picked up by the school bus just minutes before, his backpack bouncing as he ran to catch up with his friends. And Jessica, my daughter-in-law and David's wife of 6 years, had just finished tidying up the breakfast dishes before announcing she was heading upstairs. "I'm going to take a quick shower, Mom, Maggie," she called out in that gentle southern drawl of hers, her voice floating down from the staircase. I smiled and nodded, already focused on wiping down the counters and putting away the last of the morning's dishes. Jessica had always been such a blessing to our family. When David first brought her home 5 years ago, I knew immediately that she was special. There was something about her warm smile and the way she looked at my son, like he was her whole world. She had this natural grace about her, the kind that made everyone feel comfortable in her presence. Her long auburn hair always seemed to catch the light just right, and she had these expressive green eyes that sparkled when she laughed. I had barely finished loading the dishwasher when our old landline phone rang, its familiar chime cutting through the peaceful morning silence. Drying my hands on my favorite floral apron, the one Tyler had given me last Mother's Day, I hurried to answer. David's cheerful voice filled the line, bringing an instant smile to my face. "Hey, Mom, just wanted to check in. I've got a few minutes between flight rotations here at the airport." Hearing his voice was like receiving a warm hug through the phone. David has always been my pride and joy, a dedicated young man who followed his childhood dream of working with aircraft. Not as a pilot like he'd originally planned, but as an air traffic controller. A role that, as he often jokes, lets him be the conductor of an invisible orchestra in the sky. I settled into my favorite kitchen chair, the one with the soft blue cushion that's perfectly worn to fit me just right. "How's your morning going, sweetheart? Busy day up there?" He chuckled, and I could hear the familiar background sounds of the airport, distant announcements, the hum of activity, the controlled chaos that he navigates daily. "Pretty standard Tuesday morning, Mom. We've had about 15 departures since I got here at 6. Nothing too crazy, just the usual business travelers and a few vacation flights heading south. We chatted easily about this and that, how Tyler was doing in school, whether I needed anything from the store, David's plans to take Jessica out for their anniversary next month. It was the kind of comfortable conversation that flows naturally between a mother and son who've always been close. But then something in David's tone shifted. There was a pause, longer than usual, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a note of uncertainty that immediately caught my attention. "Mom, can I ask you something kind of weird?" I straightened in my chair, my maternal instincts picking up on the change in his voice. "Of course, honey. What's on your mind?" Another pause. I could hear him breathing, could almost picture him running his hand through his dark hair the way he always did when he was thinking hard about something. Is Jessica definitely at home right now? The question struck me as odd, but I answered without hesitation. "Well, yes, dear. She's upstairs taking a shower. I can hear the water running. Why do you ask?" The silence that followed was different from his earlier pauses. This one felt heavy, loaded with something I couldn't quite identify. When David finally spoke, his voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. "Mom, that's not possible." A cold finger of unease traced down my spine. "What do you mean it's not possible?" "Of course it's possible. I just saw her not 15 minutes ago. She was wearing that blue sweater she loves, the one with the little pearl buttons." "Mom, Listen to me carefully. David's voice was strained now, like he was struggling to make sense of something that defied logic. I'm looking at my computer screen right now. I'm looking at the passenger manifest for American Airlines Flight 447 to Miami that departed Gate B7 at 9:47 a.m. My heart began to beat faster, though I didn't yet understand why. Jessica Marie Thompson is listed as a passenger on that flight. She checked in at 9:15, went through security at 9:32, and boarded at 9:40. The flight took off 7 minutes ago, and I personally cleared it for departure. The kitchen suddenly felt too warm, too small. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. David, that's impossible. There must be some mistake. Maybe it's someone else with the same name? Mom. His voice was barely audible now, and I could hear the fear creeping in. It's not just the name. The system shows her frequent flyer number, the one she uses for all her trips. And Mom, she's listed as traveling with a companion, a male passenger named Richard Blackwood. The name meant nothing to me, but the way David said it, like it was a piece of a puzzle that didn't fit anywhere in our family picture, made my stomach clench with dread. I don't understand, I whispered, my voice sounding strange and far away even to my own ears. David, I can hear the shower running upstairs. I can hear her moving around up there. I know this sounds crazy, Mom, but I need you to go check. Actually go upstairs and make sure it's really her. My legs felt unsteady as I stood up, the phone cord stretching as I moved toward the staircase. Each step felt like I was walking through thick honey, my mind struggling to process what David was telling me. I'm going upstairs now, I said into the phone, my voice barely steady. But David, I'm telling you, she's here. She has to be here. The sound of running water grew louder as I climbed the stairs, each step creaking under my weight in the familiar way they had for the past 20 years. The bathroom door was closed, just as I expected, and steam was seeping out from underneath. Jessica? I called out, knocking gently on the door. Honey, are you okay in there? Silence. I knocked again, harder this time. Jessica? David's on the phone and he needs to ask you something. Still nothing but the sound of water hitting the shower floor. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. It turned easily. We'd never been a family that locked bathroom doors. The steam hit my face as I pushed the door open, and for a moment, I couldn't see clearly through the fog. But as the steam cleared, my world tilted on its axis. The shower was running, hot water cascading down the glass doors. Jessica's clothes were neatly folded on the bathroom counter, the blue sweater with pearl buttons, her jeans, even her undergarments. Her wedding ring sat on the edge of the sink, right where she always placed it before showering. But the shower was empty. David, I whispered into the phone, my voice cracking. She's not here. The shower is running, her clothes are here, but she's gone. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When David finally spoke, his voice was hollow with disbelief. Mom, that's impossible. How can someone be on a plane to Miami and disappear from a locked bathroom at the same time? I stood there in the steamy bathroom, staring at the empty shower, trying to make sense of something that made no sense at all. The rational part of my mind insisted there had to be an explanation. People don't just vanish into thin air. They don't board planes while simultaneously taking showers in their own homes. But the evidence was right in front of me, or rather, the absence of evidence. Jessica was gone, but all signs pointed to her being there just moments before. I'm coming home, David said, his voice tight with worry. Don't touch anything. Don't move anything. I'll be there in 20 minutes. After I hung up, I found myself standing in our living room, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. Everything was exactly as it should be. The family photos on the mantle, Tyler's toys neatly arranged in their basket, the morning newspaper still folded on the coffee table where David had left it. But something fundamental had shifted. The comfortable familiarity of my own home now felt foreign, like I was standing in a movie set designed to look like my life, but missing some essential element that made it real. I sank into my husband's old recliner, the one I'd kept even though he'd been gone for 8 years now, and tried to think. Really think. When was the last time I had actually seen Jessica face to face this morning? The memory came back in fragments. She'd been in the kitchen when I came downstairs around 7:30. We'd exchanged good mornings, talked about Tyler's upcoming school project, discussed what to make for dinner. She'd seemed perfectly normal, cheerful, engaged, present. But now, trying to recall the details, something nagged at me. Had she looked directly at me when we spoke? Had we made eye contact? The harder I tried to remember, the more the memory seemed to slip away, like trying to hold water in my cupped hands. I was still sitting there, lost in thought, when I heard a car door slam in the driveway. David's footsteps on the front porch were quick and urgent, and he burst through the door with a look of barely controlled panic on his face. "Mom, tell me exactly what happened this morning. Every detail you can remember." We sat together on the couch, and I walked him through the morning routine step by step. As I spoke, I watched his face grow more troubled with each detail. "And you're absolutely certain it was Jessica you saw this morning?" he asked when I finished. "Of course I'm certain. Who else would it be? She was wearing her usual morning clothes. She sounded like herself. She acted like herself." I trailed off, realizing how weak that sounded given our current circumstances. David pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot from the airport's passenger system. There it was, in black and white. Jessica Marie Thompson, seat 12A, departed Memphis International at 9:47 a.m., destination Miami International Airport. "David, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." I took his hands in mine, looking directly into his eyes, those same brown eyes he'd inherited from his father. "Has Jessica been acting different lately? Anything at all that seemed off or unusual?" He was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Now that you mention it, yeah. There have been some things. Little things that I probably wouldn't have noticed if you hadn't asked." "What kind of things?" "Well, last week she signed a birthday card for Tyler, and her handwriting looked different. More, I don't know, more careful? Like she was concentrating really hard on forming each letter. And a few days ago, Mrs. Henderson from next door mentioned that Jessica had walked right past her in the grocery store without saying hello. When I asked Jessica about it, she said she never saw Mrs. Henderson there." My heart began to race as pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve started falling into place. "There's more," David continued, his voice growing more troubled. "Sometimes when I come home from work, Jessica seems— I can't explain it exactly. Like she's surprised to see me, even though she knows my schedule by heart. And Tyler mentioned something weird last week." "What did Tyler say?" "He said that some days Mommy gives the best hugs in the world, but other days she hugs him like she doesn't really know how. I thought he was just being dramatic. You know how kids are, but now—" We sat in silence, both of us afraid to voice what we were thinking. The implications were too strange, too impossible to accept. That's when we heard the front door open. "I'm back!" came Jessica's cheerful voice from the entryway. "Sorry I was gone so long. Had to run to the pharmacy for some headache medicine." David and I exchanged a look of pure shock. We both turned toward the hallway as Jessica appeared in the doorway of the living room, looking perfectly normal and completely at ease. She was wearing different clothes now, a red blouse and black slacks instead of the blue sweater I'd seen her in earlier. Her hair was dry and styled, not wet from a shower. She carried a small pharmacy bag in one hand and her purse in the other. "What's wrong?" she asked, noticing our expressions. "You both look like you've seen a ghost." David stood up slowly, his face pale. "Jessica, where have you been?" "I told you, at the pharmacy, CVS on Poplar Avenue. Why? What time did you leave the house?" Jessica looked confused by the question. "I don't know, maybe around 9:15. Why are you asking me this?" "And you've been at the pharmacy this whole time?" "Well, no, I stopped at Starbucks too, got myself a latte." She held up a coffee cup I hadn't noticed before. "David, what's going on? You're scaring me." I found my voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Jessica, when you left this morning, did you take a shower first?" "A shower?" She looked genuinely puzzled. "No, I showered last night before bed. Why would I shower again this morning?" David pulled out his phone and showed her the screenshot of the passenger manifest. "Jessica, can you explain this?" She stared at the screen, her face going through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked almost like fear. "I don't understand. This says I was on a plane to Miami? That's impossible. I've been here in Memphis all morning. You can check with the pharmacy, with Starbucks. I have receipts." She fumbled in her purse and pulled out 2 receipts, holding them out to us with shaking hands. The timestamps showed purchases at 9:32 a.m. and 9:45 a.m. right here in Memphis. But David's passenger manifest showed her boarding a plane at 9:40 a.m. "Jessica," I said carefully, "do you have a sister?" The question seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She took a step backward, her face going white. "Why, Why would you ask me that? Just answer the question, please. No. I was adopted. I don't know if I have any biological siblings. My adoptive parents never told me much about my birth family. David and I looked at each other. The pieces were starting to form a picture, but it was a picture neither of us wanted to see. Jessica, David said gently, I think we need to sit down and talk. Really talk. Because something is happening here that none of us understand, and we need to figure it out together. But even as he said it, I could see in Jessica's eyes that she understood more than she was letting on. There was a flicker of something, guilt, fear, recognition, that told me our perfect family was built on a foundation that was about to crumble. Over the next few days, I found myself watching Jessica with new eyes. Every gesture, every word, every expression was scrutinized for clues to a mystery I was afraid to solve. I started keeping a notebook, writing down every little thing that seemed off or unusual. The way she held her coffee cup with her left hand on Tuesday, but her right hand on Wednesday. How she called Tyler Sweetie one day and Buddy the next when she'd always consistently used Sweetie before. The fact that she seemed to forget where we kept the good china, even though she'd set the table with it dozens of times. Most disturbing of all was the way she sometimes looked at me, like she was trying to remember something important but couldn't quite grasp it. I began to feel like I was living with a stranger who happened to look exactly like my daughter-in-law. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. Tyler had been working on a school project about family trees, and he asked Jessica to help him write down information about her side of the family. I don't know much about my biological family, she told him, which was consistent with what she'd always said. But then Tyler, in that innocent way children have of asking the most penetrating questions, said, Mommy, how come sometimes you remember things about when you were little, but other times you say you don't remember anything? Jessica froze, her pen hovering over the paper. What do you mean, sweetheart? Like last week, you told me about the time you fell off your bike when you were 7 and got a scar on your knee. But today when I asked about it, you said you didn't remember falling off any bike. I watched Jessica's face carefully, and I saw it. A flash of panic, quickly covered by a forced smile. Oh, you know how it is, Tyler. Sometimes memories come and go. Maybe I was thinking of a movie I saw or something. But Tyler wasn't satisfied. Can I see the scar? The scar? On your knee. From when you fell off the bike. Jessica looked down at her knees, visible below the hem of her skirt. There was no scar. It must have faded, she said weakly. That night, after Tyler was asleep and David was working late, I confronted Jessica directly. I know something is going on, I told her as we sat in the living room. I don't know what it is, but I know you're not telling us the truth about something. She looked at me with those green eyes that had always seemed so warm and open, but now I could see something guarded behind them. Mom, Maggie, I don't know what you want me to say. I'm the same person I've always been. Are you? I asked quietly. Because the Jessica I've known for 5 years would never forget where we keep the good china. She would never call Tyler Buddy instead of Sweetie. And she would never, ever board a plane to Miami without telling her family. Jessica's composure cracked just a little. I told you I wasn't on any plane. There must be some mistake with the computer system. Then explain the receipts that show you were in Memphis at the exact same time the airline says you were boarding a plane. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, trying to find an explanation that would satisfy me. Maybe someone stole my identity, she said finally. Maybe someone is using my name and frequent flyer number. It was possible, I supposed. But it didn't explain all the other little inconsistencies, all the small ways she seemed different. Jessica, I said, taking her hands in mine, if you're in some kind of trouble, you can tell us. We're family. We'll help you no matter what. For just a moment, I thought she was going to break down and tell me everything. Her eyes filled with tears and her hands trembled in mine. But then she pulled away and stood up. There's nothing to tell, Mom, Maggie. I think you're letting your imagination run away with you. She left the room, and I heard her footsteps on the stairs, followed by the sound of the bedroom door closing. I sat there alone, more convinced than ever that the woman living in my house was not the Jessica I had come to love as a daughter. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to follow her. Jessica left the house at 9:30, saying she was going to the grocery store. I waited 5 minutes, then got in my car and drove in the direction she'd gone. I found her car parked outside a small diner on the outskirts of town, a place called Mel's that I'd never known her to visit before. Through the window, I could see her sitting in a booth across from a woman who looked exactly like her. Exactly like her. Same auburn hair, same green eyes, same facial features. They could have been twins. They were twins. I sat in my car, hands shaking, watching my daughter-in-law have an intense conversation with her identical twin sister. A sister she'd claimed not to know existed. Everything suddenly made sense. The inconsistencies, the personality changes, the way she sometimes seemed like a stranger. Because sometimes she was a stranger. Jessica had been switching places with her twin sister, and I had no idea why. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling with the implications. How long had this been going on? What was Jessica hiding that required such an elaborate deception? And who was the woman I'd been living with, caring for, treating as my own daughter? When Jessica returned home an hour later, I was waiting for her in the kitchen. "How was the grocery store?" I asked casually. "Fine," she replied, but I noticed she wasn't carrying any grocery bags. "Forget to buy anything?" She paused, clearly caught off guard. "Oh, they didn't have what I needed. I'll try somewhere else later." "Jessica," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "I saw you at Mel's diner. I saw you with your sister." The color drained from her face. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it, but then her shoulders sagged in defeat. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "I've suspected something was wrong for days, but I only figured it out this morning." She sank into a chair across from me, her hands covering her face. "I'm so sorry, Mom Maggie. I never wanted to hurt anyone." "Then tell me the truth. All of it." And finally, she did. Jessica's twin sister was named Emma. They had been separated at birth and given to different adoptive families. Emma had grown up in poverty, struggling to make ends meet, while Jessica had been fortunate enough to be adopted by a middle-class family who gave her opportunities Emma never had. They'd found each other 3 years ago through a DNA testing website. At first, it had been a joyful reunion. 2 sisters finally connected after a lifetime apart. But then Jessica had met Richard Blackwood. Richard was everything David wasn't: wealthy, sophisticated, worldly. He owned a chain of luxury hotels and traveled constantly for business. He promised Jessica a life of adventure and luxury, far from the quiet domesticity of Memphis. But Jessica didn't want to lose her family. She loved David, in her way. And she adored Tyler. She just wanted more than the life she had. So she'd made a deal with Emma. Emma would occasionally take her place at home, playing the role of wife and mother, while Jessica traveled with Richard. In exchange, Jessica would pay Emma enough money to finally escape the poverty that had defined her life. "It was only supposed to be for a few days at a time," Jessica said, tears streaming down her face. "Emma needed the money so desperately, and I thought I could have both lives. The security of my family and the excitement of being with Richard." "And Emma agreed to this?" "She didn't want to at first, but her adoptive mother is sick, and the medical bills—" Emma was desperate. "She's actually a sweet person, Mom Maggie. She never wanted to deceive you. She tried so hard to be me, to make you happy." I thought about all the times Jessica had seemed different, and I realized that some of those times she'd actually seemed more attentive, more caring. Emma, trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law, had sometimes been more loving than Jessica herself. "Where is Jessica now?" I asked. "The real Jessica?" "In Miami, with Richard. She's been there since Tuesday." "And you're Emma?" She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "I'm sorry. I know how wrong this is. I know we've been lying to you and David and Tyler, but I didn't know how else to help my mom and Jessica. She was so convincing. She made it sound like it wouldn't hurt anyone." I looked at this woman, Emma, who had been living in my house, caring for my grandson, trying so hard to fill a role that wasn't hers. Despite the deception, despite the lies, I could see the genuine remorse in her eyes. Does David know? No. Jessica made me promise never to tell him. She said it would destroy the family. And Tyler? He doesn't know either. But I think he can sense something. Children are more perceptive than we give them credit for. That evening, when David came home from work, I asked him to sit down. Emma was upstairs with Tyler, helping him with his homework. "David, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be very difficult to hear." I told him everything. About the twin sister, about the deception, about Richard Blackwood and the double life Jessica had been leading. I watched my son's face go through the same range of emotions I'd experienced. disbelief, anger, hurt, and finally, a deep sadness. So the woman upstairs with Tyler right now, that's not my wife? No, that's Emma, Jessica's twin sister. But David, I need you to know something. Emma has been nothing but kind and loving toward Tyler. She's been trying so hard to be a good mother to him, even though she's not his real mother. David was quiet for a long time, processing everything I'd told him. I need to talk to her, he said finally. We called Emma downstairs, and the three of us sat in the living room where so many family conversations had taken place over the years. But this one was different. This one would determine the future of our family. Emma told her story again, this time to David. She explained about her difficult childhood, her sick adoptive mother, her desperate need for money. She talked about how Jessica had presented the arrangement as a temporary solution that wouldn't hurt anyone. I know what we did was wrong, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know we betrayed your trust. But I want you to know that every moment I spent with Tyler, every conversation I had with Mom Maggie, every dinner we shared as a family, those weren't lies. My feelings for this family, my love for Tyler, that's all real. David looked at her for a long moment. Where is Jessica now? She's supposed to come back tomorrow. She doesn't know that you found out. And after that, what was the plan? Emma shook her head. I don't think there was a long-term plan. Jessica just kept saying we'd figure it out as we went along. The next evening, Jessica returned home as if nothing had happened. She walked through the front door with a bright smile and a small gift bag for Tyler. I'm back, she called out cheerfully. Sorry I was gone so long. Had to help my friend Sarah with some family stuff. But we were all waiting for her in the living room. David, Emma, Tyler, and me. The look on her face when she saw Emma sitting there was one I'll never forget. Pure panic, followed by resignation. I guess you know, she said quietly. We know, David replied, his voice steady but cold. What followed was the most difficult conversation our family had ever had. Jessica tried to justify what she'd done, tried to make us understand that she'd never meant to hurt anyone. She talked about feeling trapped, about wanting more from life, about Richard offering her opportunities she'd never dreamed of. But with each word, I could see David pulling further away from her. The trust that had been the foundation of their marriage was gone, shattered beyond repair. Tyler, who had been listening with the wide-eyed confusion of a child trying to understand adult problems, finally spoke up. Mommy, why are there two of you? It was Emma who answered, kneeling down to Tyler's level and speaking with a gentleness that broke my heart. Tyler, sweetie, Jessica, and I are sisters. We look exactly alike because we're twins, but we're different people and we made some very bad choices that hurt people we care about. Are you going away? Tyler asked, and I could hear the fear in his voice. Emma looked at David, then at me, then back at Tyler. I don't know, sweetheart. That's not up to me. In the end, Jessica made the choice for all of us. She stood up, looked around the room at the family she was leaving behind and said, I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend to be someone I'm not. She packed her bags that night and left with Richard, who had been waiting in a hotel downtown. She signed divorce papers without contest and relinquished all parental rights to Tyler. The last thing she said to me was, take care of Emma. She's a better person than I ever was. And she was right. Emma stayed. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had found something she'd been searching for her whole life. A family that loved her for who she really was. It took time, of course. Trust had to be rebuilt. Relationships had to be redefined. Emma had to learn to be herself instead of trying to be Jessica. David had to grieve the loss of the woman he thought he'd married while opening his heart to the woman who had shown him what real love looked like. But slowly, carefully, we became a family again. A different family than we'd been before, but in many ways, a stronger one. 6 months later, David and Emma were married in a small ceremony in our backyard. Tyler, who had come to understand that Emma was the one who had given him the best hugs, the most patient help with homework, and the most genuine love, walked her down the aisle. As I watched them exchange vows, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. It had started with an impossible phone call, a question that shouldn't have had the answer it did. It had led us through deception and betrayal, through pain and confusion. But it had also led us to Emma, who had started as an imposter but had become the heart of our family. Sometimes the truth is painful. Sometimes it destroys everything you thought you knew about your life. But sometimes, if you're very lucky, it also reveals something beautiful that was hidden underneath all the lies. Tyler calls Emma Mom now, and she calls him my son. David looks at her the way he used to look at Jessica, but with a deeper appreciation for the gift of honesty. And I have gained not just a daughter-in-law, but a daughter of the heart. The story you've just heard has been altered in names and places to protect the identities of those involved. I'm not sharing this to judge anyone, but in the hope that someone listening might recognize the signs I missed for so long. How many families are living with deceptions they don't even know exist? I often wonder what would have happened if David hadn't called that day, if he hadn't seen Jessica's name on that passenger manifest. Would we have continued living the lie indefinitely? Would Emma have eventually found the courage to tell us the truth? I suppose I'll never know. But I do know this. The truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a beautiful lie. If you were in my position, what would you have done? Would you have chosen to look the other way to preserve the peace? Or would you have had the courage to face the truth, no matter the consequences? I'd love to hear your thoughts because every story is like a candle that can light the way for someone else walking a similar path. God always provides, and I'm convinced that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the end screen, I'm leaving you with two of the most beloved stories from this channel. I'm sure they'll surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.